The late August sun spilled a soft golden light across Grand Teton National Park, painting the wide meadow in tones of amber and green. Families gathered on the grass, unpacking sandwiches and trail mix, children darting between sagebrush clumps. Laughter echoing in the open air. Maya Carter sat near the edge of the field, her sketchbook resting on the tray of her wheelchair, her service dog Scout curled quietly by her feet. She had chosen this spot because of the view, the jagged ridges of the Tetons rising in the distance, the sweep of willow thickets hugging the stream, and beyond them the endless stretch of wild country that felt alive with unseen eyes. For Maya, every outing like this was a small victory. Moving through the park in her wheelchair wasn't easy. Gravel paths, uneven ground, long distances, but she cherished the freedom it gave her. Her parents, Jenna and Cole, had helped her navigate to the meadow, then stepped a few feet away to talk with another family. For a few minutes, Maya was alone with her thoughts, her pencil scratching across the paper as she sketched the curve of a mule deer's back grazing at the edge of the clearing. That's when Scout lifted his head. His ears pricked forward, body tense, a low whine vibrating in his chest. Maya followed his gaze. At first, she saw only the willow branches swaying gently, shadows shifting as the wind moved through, but then the shape materialized, large, heavy, deliberate. A grizzly bear stepped from the cover of the thickets into the open. Time seemed to stretch thin. The families who had been laughing fell silent. Parents grabbed their children's hands. The sound of a juice box, straw, sucking the last drop of apple juice cut through the stillness, strangely loud. Even the birds seemed to be quiet. The bear's coat glowed a rich brown in the slanting light. Its head moved slowly side to side, nose lifted to read the wind. It wasn't charging, it wasn't posturing, but it was walking forward with steady intent straight toward Maya. Scout pressed closer to her chair but didn't bark. Somehow he seemed to know that this was a moment where silence mattered more than sound. Maya froze, her pencil slipping from her fingers onto the grass. Across the meadow, Cole took a half step forward, instinct urging him toward his daughter. Ranger Daniel Ortiz, who had been making his afternoon patrol, raised a hand quickly, whispering for everyone to hold still. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of long experience. He knew that sudden movements could shift curiosity into defense and defense into danger. The bear drew closer, 40 yards, 30. Its shoulders rolled with quiet power paws, pressing into the earth with surprising softness. It huffed once, a low exhalation visible in the cool mountain air. Maya's heartbeat thudded in her ears. Yet instead of fear, a strange calm wrapped around her. She felt as though the bear wasn't threatening her, but acknowledging her, studying her with a kind of measured patience. This is where the science and the mystery often blur. Grizzly bears in late August are in hyperphagia, a state of near-constant feeding, packing on as many calories as possible before winter. They roam miles each day, noses working like instruments, searching for berries, roots, carrion, or fish. To stumble on a picnic meadow filled with humans could trigger many responses: avoidance, defensiveness, or, in rare cases, curiosity. The bear's choice to approach was not affection, it was behavior shaped by biology and circumstance. Yet for Maya, sitting still in her chair, the moment felt personal. Wild animals are not characters in our story. They carry their own survival, their own needs, their own instincts. When we project our emotions onto them, we risk misunderstanding the signals. A lowered head might not be a bow, it might be preparation for a bluff charge. A pause might not be hesitation, it might be calculation. The responsibility falls on us as visitors in their world to read these signs with humility and respect. Still, the mystery is undeniable. Many people who have shared space with a grizzly speak of a sense of being seen, of feeling the gravity of a creature whose presence commands silence. It is not magic. It is awareness sharpened by millions of years of survival. But the effect on the human heart can feel like magic all the same. Ranger Ortiz whispered almost to himself, "Hold still, give it space." His voice carried enough for the nearby families to hear. A mother clutched her son's shoulder tighter. A teenager slowly lowered his phone, the red recording light blinking before it went dark. Maya raised her hand slightly palm open, not in a wave, but in an instinctive gesture of peace. Her fingers trembled. The bear stopped, its dark eyes locked onto her. For a suspended moment, meadow and mountain and sky seemed to converge into silence. Then, as quietly as it had come, the grizzly shifted its course. It turned, slightly padding across the meadow's edge, pausing once more to lift its nose into the breeze. With another huff, it slipped back into the willows and was gone. The meadow exhaled. Voices rose again, hushed, almost reverent. A toddler began to cry. Parents exchanged looks that blended relief with awe. Cole hurried to Maya's side, his hand gripping the handle of her chair. Jenna knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Maya nodded, still staring at the place where the bear had vanished. She felt both smaller and larger all at once, fragile in her chair, yet somehow part of something vast and unexplainable. What happened in those few minutes was extraordinary, but it was not a miracle. It was a reminder. A grizzly bear, a creature powerful enough to end a life in seconds, had chosen calm. And a group of people fragile and uncertain had chosen stillness. In that shared pause, the wild and the human coexisted without harm. Safety in wild places doesn't come from eliminating risk. It comes from honoring boundaries. The bear respected the space, and the people guided by the ranger respected the bear. That fragile balance is what keeps encounters from turning into tragedies. For Maya, the encounter would not end with the bear's departure. Something had stirred in her, the sense that this moment carried weight beyond fear or fascination. She reached down, picked up her fallen pencil, and pressed it back to the page, the outline of her deer sketch now joined by the faint unfinished curve of a massive paw. This is where our story begins. Because what followed this encounter, what unfolded in the days ahead, would deepen the mystery, test the boundaries of trust, and leave everyone involved forever changed. And to understand why this moment mattered so deeply, we need to step back to know who Maya is, how she came to be in this meadow, and why her bond with the wild was unlike anything most of us will ever know. Before the bear, before the hush that swept the meadow, there was Maya. To understand what that moment meant, we need to see her not only as a girl in a wheelchair, but as someone who carried grit in every mile she traveled and every page she filled with sketches. Maya Carter was 12, curious, quick with a smile, and rarely still in her mind, even if her chair kept her grounded. A spinal injury from a car accident when she was 6 had changed her body, but not her will. When friends asked her what it felt like to lose walking, she would shrug. "It's not about losing," she'd say, "it's about how you keep moving." Her answer wasn't rehearsed. It was how she lived. Grand Teton was her favorite place, though she hadn't visited often. Her parents, Jenna and Cole, made sure trips into wild country were possible, even if it meant long planning sessions, spreadsheets with trail grades, and late-night phone calls with park staff. They learned which meadows had compact gravel, which boardwalks had slopes gentle enough for Maya's chair, and which restrooms had wide doors. They discovered shuttle routes that could save her shoulders from miles of pushing, and which picnic sites were close enough to parking but still felt wild. For the Carters' adventure meant logistics first, beauty second, and yet Maya didn't talk about ramps or rest areas. What she talked about were the things she saw. The red flash of a mountain bluebird cutting across the sky. The sound of elk bugling in fall echoing like ancient horns. The willows bent near the water where moose browsed. These were the things she sketched late at night, pencil smudges on her hands. Pages filled with animals that were alive in her imagination. That day in the meadow, she had chosen to sketch a mule deer. But the truth is, Maya always waited for the unexpected, an animal that might wander into frame a shape she couldn't predict. She once told her mom, "Animals notice things about me that people don't. They don't see my chair. They just see me sitting still." That was why she loved the wild. It stripped away labels. Scout, her golden retriever service dog, was part of that freedom. Trained to retrieve dropped items and offer steady support. He also carried his own quiet awareness of the natural world. In parks like this, dogs could be a risk. Ranger Daniel Ortiz often reminded visitors that bears saw dogs as rivals. But Scout's calmness was unusual. He stayed close to Maya's chair, responding to her cues, giving her both independence and companionship. For her parents, his presence was reassurance. For Maya, he was another way she belonged outside. Here's where the explanation matters. Access to wild places for wheelchair users isn't simple. Trails that look flat on paper may tilt just enough to exhaust arms. Gravel can trap wheels. Boardwalk slats can jar the body with every bump. Bathrooms may be accessible in theory, but impossible to maneuver in reality. For families like the Carters, every outing carried risk. Breakdowns, sudden fatigue, weather shifts. Yet they kept coming. Why? Because the reward of seeing their daughter light up in the presence of wild animals was worth every barrier. An example sticks out. On an earlier trip, Maya wanted to see bison. They drove to a turnout where a herd grazed in the distance. Other visitors hopped from cars, phones raised walking straight into the sagebrush. The ranger on duty waved them back, voice firm. Cole lifted his binoculars. Jenna steadied the tripod, and Maya, lower than everyone else seated in her chair, saw something different, not just the herd. She noticed calves moving behind the cows, shielded from view, their legs wobbly but determined. She sketched them quickly, catching the fragile strength in their stance. Everyone's looking at the big ones, she said, but the little ones tell the story. That was Maya, always noticing what others missed. The small lesson here is that access isn't just about building ramps or marking trails. It's about perspective. When you sit lower, slower when the world isn't rushed, you see details others pass by. Maya's wheelchair didn't take her out of the wild. It gave her a different lens on it. And through that lens, she found connection. There's a fresh perspective worth holding on to. Many think of wheelchair users as limited in wild spaces, but what if we flip that? What if their way of moving, deliberate and paced, is actually closer to how wild animals move? Quiet, observant, patient. In a sense, Maya had more in common with the mule deer she sketched than with the hikers who rushed to snap photos and move on. Her stillness was not a restriction. It was presence. That is why the meadow encounter mattered. To others, the bear's approach was shocking, frightening. To Maya, it felt like a continuation of a truth she already knew: animals respond to presence. They sense calm. They notice when someone is not rushing at them or away from them. She was not prey, not threat. She was just there, steady, watching. Of course, that doesn't mean what happened was safe. It wasn't. Rangers remind visitors constantly that bears are unpredictable and that stillness doesn't guarantee safety. But it does shift dynamics. Maya's way of being in the world gave her a kind of accidental wisdom, an ability to meet the bear without panic. That doesn't erase risk. It does show us how mindset can shape moments. Cole and Jenna often joked that their daughter was the frameworker in the family, the one who broke things down into small, manageable pieces. If we get stuck, she would say, let's just solve one thing at a time. A path too steep. Find a spot to rest. A bathroom too narrow. Look for the next stop. Her resilience was not loud. It was practical. It's worth comparing many visitors to parks like Grand Teton rush through itineraries, checking landmarks like boxes. Maya moved differently. Each outing was slower, but deeper. She never saw the pace as a burden. She saw it as permission. Permission to look longer at a bird on a branch or at the play of light on water. That's why she always carried her sketchbook. To her, drawing wasn't just a hobby, it was the way she translated stillness into memory. What does this mean for us? The viewers. Maybe the lesson is that access and wonder aren't opposites. You don't need to cover 10 miles to experience wilderness. Sometimes sitting in one meadow, watching, waiting, and noticing can give you more than any summit ever will. Maya's story isn't just about overcoming a wheelchair, it's about redefining what exploration means. And that is why the bear found her where it did. By chance, yes. By biology. Yes, but also by presence. In a meadow filled with people, she was the one most still, most attuned. the one whose quiet matched the bear's quiet. As we move forward, keep this in mind. The wild doesn't always speak in roars or charges. Sometimes it speaks in pauses, in the space between breaths, in the quiet of a child sketching on a page. And when the bear did stop just feet away from Maya's chair, the meadow held its breath. What unfolded in that standoff would blur the line between fear and connection and teach everyone present what it truly means to be seen by a wild animal. The meadow had grown quiet in an almost unbearable way. Even the breeze seemed to pause as the grizzly bear stepped closer to Maya's wheelchair. Scout pressed against her leg, steady but alert, his leash taut between them. Families stayed frozen whispers caught in throats. Ranger Daniel Ortiz raised his hand again, eyes fixed on the animal, his other hand hovering near the canister of bear spray clipped to his belt. The bear stopped at 40 yards, then 30. It tilted its head, nostrils flaring, reading the meadow like a page. Its ears twitched forward, then sideways, a small shift that carried volumes of meaning. Maya could feel the weight of its gaze, not wild rage, not domesticated calm, but something in between, something impossible to name. When we see a bear pause, we often project our feelings onto it. We call it curious, gentle, or even friendly. But wildlife biology offers a more grounded read. A grizzly at this distance is testing information. The nose is gathering scents. The ears are gauging sound. The body is measuring distance. This is not affection, it is assessment. An example helps. Years ago, a hiker near Yellowstone described a grizzly that bowed to her before leaving. Later, biologists reviewed the account and explained that the bear had likely lowered its head to catch ground scents or signal uncertainty. What felt like reverence was really behavior rooted in survival. Both readings were true in their own way, true to the human heart and true to the animal's instincts. This duality is what makes standoffs like Maya's so powerful. The bear took another step. Maya gripped her pencil knuckles white, then slowly let it drop again. She raised her hand, palm open. Not a wave, not a command, just a gesture. The bear huffed a low breath rolling from deep in its chest. Ortiz whispered, "That's a warning," his voice so soft only the nearest parents heard. Yet to Maya, it didn't sound like aggression. It sounded like acknowledgement. This is where the small lesson comes in. Connection and interpretation are not the same. We feel a connection when a wild animal meets our eyes or holds still near us. But interpretation, what we decide that moment means must be cautious. A stare can be dominance. A pause can be indecision. To mistake survival signals for tenderness can lead to tragedy. The wisdom lies in holding both truths to honor the connection without misreading it. Maya's stillness made the difference. She did not scream, she did not lurch forward, she did not push her chair in panic. She stayed steady, letting the moment unfold. Scout mirrored her silent tale, low, resisting the urge to bark. Around them, people strained to stay quiet, phones trembling in their hands. The meadow seemed to shrink, pulling every heart into the space between child and bear. There's a fresh perspective worth considering. For most of us, stillness is hard. We are wired to act, to move, to fix. But wild animals respond to cues we often overlook. Sudden flailing or shouting can escalate tension. Calm, measured presence can sometimes de-escalate it. Maya didn't choose stillness as a strategy, it was who she was. But in that stillness lay a kind of strength. The bear shifted again, lowering its head toward the ground. Ortiz's eyes narrowed. "It's reading her scent," he murmured. The bear sniffed, pawing softly at the soil, then lifted its head once more. Dark eyes met Maya's. For a suspended second, the line between species blurred. She felt seen, not pitied, not feared, but noticed. Another example gives this context. In Glacier National Park, a photographer once described a grizzly locking eyes with him at close range. He felt awe. Later, reviewing footage experts noted the bear had been scanning for a threat, not making eye contact in the human sense. Yet, the photographer's awe was real. These moments are not wrong, they just live in two dimensions at once, human meaning, animal instinct. The meadow's silence broke when a small child whimpered. The bear flicked an ear body stiffening, Ortiz's tensed hand closing over the bear spray. Maya whispered without thinking, "It's okay." Whether she meant it for Scout, for herself, or for the bear, no one could tell. But the sound, gentle and low, seemed to ease the charge in the air. The bear exhaled again, longer this time. Then it turned. A slow pivot of massive shoulders, a pause at the edge of the willows. One last look back. And just like that, it vanished into green. The meadow erupted in breath. Parents hugged children, voices rose, relief spilling over. Phones flashed, capturing the aftermath. Some laughed nervously, others wiped tears. Cole rushed to Maya's side, his hand firm on her chair, Jenna dropping to her knees. "Are you hurt?" "Did it?" Maya shook her head. "No, it just looked." Here's where the broader lesson lands. To witness a wild animal this close is unforgettable. But the take-home isn't that bears want to connect, it's that boundaries matter. The distance rules 100 yards for bears exist because what happened to Maya is not the norm, and repeating it can endanger both people and animals. The small victory here was not that the bear chose her. It was that nobody moved in ways that escalated the conflict. Sometimes restraint is the most powerful action. We live in a culture that prizes boldness approach, pursue, capture the photo. Yet in bear country, restraint is survival. By doing less, you often do more for yourself and for the bear's future. As the ranger began guiding families away, posting a quick advisory on his radio, Maya stayed quiet, her sketchbook open on her lap. She traced the curve of a paw she hadn't fully seen, trying to hold on to the mystery of the encounter. Around her, the meadow was just a meadow again. But in her mind, it had become something sacred. What happened next was just as important, not the silence, not the awe, but the actions that followed. Because when a grizzly approaches this close, the story doesn't end with its retreat. Rangers, protocols, and entire communities step in, shaping what happens to the bear and to the people who witnessed it. And that's where the heart of this story widens. The meadow's tension had broken, but for Ranger Daniel Ortiz, the work was only beginning. Families were still whispering, glancing back toward the willows, as if the grizzly bear might return at any moment. Children clutched their parents. Phones buzzed with shaky video clips already being texted to friends. Maya sat quietly in her chair, sketchbook open. Scout pressed close at her side. Her calmness was remarkable, but Ortiz knew this was not the end of the encounter. It was the start of responsibility. He lifted his radio. "Unit 5, close approach, bear sighting South Meadow pullout. Mark location, initiate advisory." His voice was steady, professional, clipped in the way of someone who had practiced these words many times. Within minutes, another ranger's acknowledgement crackled back. Ortiz pulled a bright yellow sign from his pack. "Bear advisory. Area under watch." He planted it at the trailhead post where families would see it on their way out. When a grizzly approaches humans this closely, it triggers a protocol. Rangers don't treat it as a magical moment, they treat it as a data point. The report gets logged with location, time, behavior, and crowd size. Was the bear defensive? Curious, food conditioned? Every detail matters because one misread can mean a life lost, a bear or a human. An example shows why. A decade earlier in Yellowstone, a grizzly began approaching roadside pullouts where visitors tossed food. The first reports were vague. Bear walked near cars, seemed friendly. Within a season, the bear was breaking into coolers and approaching campsites. Eventually, wildlife managers had to euthanize it, not because it was bad, but because human behavior had shifted its instincts. That's why Ortiz's first instinct wasn't to celebrate the calmness of this meadow. It was to record it, to build the case file that would protect this bear's future. He glanced at Maya. She was still sketching, eyes lowered, pencil moving across the page. Her stillness reminded him of something he'd heard from a veteran ranger. Most bears die not from claws or teeth, but from paperwork. What he meant was that bad documentation, missed reports, or ignored warnings allow patterns to escalate until the only management option left is removal. Behind every breathtaking wildlife story is a network of quiet actions. Rangers are placing signs, biologists reviewing logs, crews hazing bears with cracker shells so they relearn to keep distance. Visitors were asked to leave a trail they had planned for months. None of it feels magical in the moment, but together it saves bears from becoming statistics. Ortiz knelt near the carters. "Is she okay?" he asked, eyes scanning Maya. Jenna nodded. She didn't move, she whispered. The bear just looked. Ortiz nodded back, filing the detail away. Behavior approached, paused, huffed, departed. Visitor, reaction stillness. Dog response calm. These weren't just anecdotes, they were data. We often see rangers as enforcers, handing out tickets or shooing people off trails. But their deeper role is translation. They translate wild behavior into human understanding and human behavior into management decisions. In doing so, they act as guardians for both sides. Ortiz wasn't protecting just Maya. He was protecting the grizzly's right to remain wild, untainted by human food or aggression. Later that afternoon, Ortiz joined two colleagues for a follow-up sweep. They checked trash cans, making sure the bear hadn't been drawn by food. They walked the edge of the meadow looking for scat or tracks that might show what the animal had been foraging. They spoke with families still nearby, reminding them of distance rules. 100 yards minimum for bears, Ortiz repeated, holding his hands wide. Think a football field, that's the space you owe them. An expert cutaway could have fit here. If a biologist were on screen, they'd explain the categories. Curiosity, a bear checking something new. Habituation, a bear too used to people and food conditioning, a bear linking humans with meals. The difference matters. Curiosity can fade. Food conditioning often ends in death. Knowing the signs is the difference between a story that inspires and one that devastates. Ortiz and his team carried hazing gear starter pistols with cracker shells beanbag rounds. They didn't use them that day. The bear had left quietly. But if it had lingered, if it had approached closer, they might have fired warning shots, not to harm but to remind. A bear that learns to fear human proximity survives longer than one that learns to tolerate it. In Grand Teton, a few summers earlier, a sow with cubs frequented a lakeshore popular with anglers. She showed no aggression, simply walked through camps. Visitors loved it. Photos flooded social media. But rangers knew the risk. They hazed her repeatedly, loud pops echoing across the water until she shifted her range back into the forest. The visitors were disappointed. The cubs, though, grew up free, never associating humans with food. That's success in ranger language. Maya watched quietly as Ortiz posted the advisory. She tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Why are they putting that up?" Jenna answered gently. "To make sure everyone else knows what happened." Maya nodded, but her eyes lingered on the sign. For her, the bear was not just a report. It was a presence she still felt in her chest. Yet she understood, maybe more than most, that rules were part of love. Just as her parents mapped trails and packed supplies so she could explore safely, rangers mapped rules to protect both people and animals. Structure is not the opposite of wonder. It is what makes wonder possible again and again. Without structure, without protocols, signs, radios, hazing tools, the magic of encounters turns into accidents, and accidents erase futures. A fresh perspective widens here. Many see rules as restrictions, but rules in wild places are actually invitations. Every distance marker, every bear-safe garbage can, every advisory is an open door to experiences that last. By following them, you're not giving up freedom. You're ensuring that bears, elk, wolves, and people all keep sharing these landscapes for generations. As the sun tilted lower, Ortiz finished his notes. Families drifted back to their cars, the meadow returning to quiet. Maya wheeled herself closer to the sign scout pacing beside her. She studied the bold letters, Bear Advisory, and traced them in her sketchbook. Later, she would draw the bear again, but this time she added the sign next to it. For her, both were part of the story, the awe and the protocol side by side. because what happened the next day would push this balance even further. The grizzly would return this time with her cubs at the meadow's edge. And in that moment, Maya's sketches, the ranger's rules, and the crowd's choices would collide in ways that revealed not just beauty, but the fragile line between guardianship and risk. The morning after the encounter, the meadow looked unchanged. Sunlight spilled across the same willows, grass stirred in the same breeze, and elk grazed in the distance. But for Maya, everything felt different. She kept glancing toward the tree line, her sketchbook balanced on her lap, Scout steady beside her chair. Her parents spread a blanket a few yards away, unpacking sandwiches and fruit, trying to act casual. But everyone knew when a grizzly bear had been there once, it might return. And it did. Late in the afternoon, a ripple passed through the air. Scout's ears shot forward. The elk bolted. From the edge of the willows, a massive shape emerged again, this time not alone. 2 young yearlings trailed close to the sow, their coats shaggy, their steps clumsy but confident. The families in the meadow froze. Some gathered belongings, quickly retreating toward their cars. Others lifted phones, fingers trembling as they hit record. Maya didn't move. She lifted her pencil instead. The grizzly sow stopped just inside the meadow, her cubs shifting restlessly at her sides. She huffed once, scanning. Then her eyes found Maya. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't comfort. It was something harder to name, a recognition maybe, or simply the sharp awareness of a wild animal weighing every detail. When a sow brings cubs near humans, the stakes rise sharply. Female grizzlies are among the most defensive animals in North America. A perceived threat to cubs can trigger charges faster than almost anything else. That this bear paused instead of advancing was extraordinary, but not safe. The calmness wasn't permission. It was context. An example from history underscores this. In Yellowstone, a sow once raised 3 cubs near a popular boardwalk. At first, she simply passed by. Visitors adored it. But soon the cubs grew bolder, learning to associate people with no danger. The result? Hazing closures, escalating tension. Eventually, 1 cub had to be relocated to a sanctuary. It was a success for the cub, but a loss for the wild. Encounters that look magical often carry hidden costs. Back in the meadow, Maya's pencil moved quickly. She drew the slope of the sow's shoulders, the smaller frames of the cubs, the way their paws pressed into the earth. Her parents whispered urgently behind her, "Maya, stay still." But she already was. Stillness was her language. Awe does not erase responsibility. Sketching was not harmless if it meant ignoring rules. Yet Maya's choice to observe quietly rather than approach showed a middle ground. She wasn't chasing the encounter, she was honoring it from where she sat. In that difference lies survival for both human and bear. Ortiz arrived within minutes, summoned by radio chatter from a passing hiker. He didn't rush the meadow. He stopped at the edge, assessing. He motioned for the nearest families to step back quietly. His voice carried steady. "Everyone, stay calm. Give her space." He knew what many didn't, that each second without incident added to the bear's chance of remaining wild. The cubs shifted, sniffing the air. One stood briefly on hind legs, peering over the grass. The crowd gasped softly. For humans, it looked adorable. For Ortiz, it was data. Cubs standing often means curiosity or uncertainty, not playfulness. Every detail mattered. There's a fresh perspective here. Wildlife encounters are often framed as gifts, but in truth, they're negotiations. The bear negotiates space, deciding whether to advance, retreat, or defend. The humans negotiate behavior, whether to respect or overstep. Ethics enter when we decide what story to tell afterward. Do we post videos that glorify closeness, encouraging risk, or do we frame them as warnings, teaching restraint? The narrative we choose can shape the next visitor's choices. Maya lowered her pencil. She didn't need to finish the sketch right away. She really looked at the sow's eyes. They weren't soft or kind, but they weren't cruel. They were alive, ancient, deliberate. For her, that was enough. Another example illustrates the weight of choice. In Grand Teton National Park, a photographer once stayed as a sow with cubs grazed near his lens. He got award-winning images, but he also lingered too long. Rangers later fined him for violating distance rules. His pictures traveled the world, inspiring wonder, but the sow became habituated to people and had to be repeatedly hazed. Was the art worth the cost? Each viewer must decide. But rangers know the math. When wild animals lose fear of humans, they usually lose everything else too. Ortiz raised his hand, signaling again for stillness. After several tense minutes, the sow huffed once more, nudged her cubs and turned back into the willows. The meadow exhaled. Relief swept through parents' laughter, spilling nervously, phones lowering. The danger had passed, but the questions remained. Maya's parents knelt beside her. "That was too close," Jenna whispered. "We can't let this keep happening." Maya nodded slowly, eyes on her sketchbook. "But it did happen," she said. Her words carried both wonder and weight. She had witnessed something extraordinary, but extraordinary moments demand extraordinary care. Our responsibility doesn't end when the bear walks away. It begins there. Every decision afterward, what we share, how we talk about it, whether we follow rules, shapes whether that bear survives her season. Ethics in wildlife storytelling aren't abstract. They are as real as the fate of a sow and her cubs. Boundaries can be love. To hold back, to resist chasing the perfect photo or lingering too close is not to diminish the wild. It is to honor it. In choosing distance, we give animals freedom to remain themselves, unshaped by our needs, untouched by our interference. That evening, Maya added shading to her sketch. She drew the cubs tucked against their mother, their forms strong yet fragile. On the page, they looked eternal. In reality, their survival depended on choices strangers would make tomorrow, whether to secure food, whether to leash dogs, and whether to obey signs. That's the paradox of wild animal stories. We can love them deeply, yet our love can endanger them unless tempered with responsibility. And for Maya, the question grew heavier. Why did the bear seem to notice her again and again? Was it recognition, memory, something more than chance? To answer that, we turn to what science can tell us and what it cannot about the mysteries of memory and meaning in the minds of grizzly bears. After the second encounter, Maya couldn't stop asking the question, "Why me?" She sat in the cabin that night with Scout's head resting on her knee, sketchbook open, replaying the image of the grizzly sow standing with her cubs. Twice now the bear had noticed her. Twice its eyes seemed to hold. She whispered to her parents, "I think she knows me." They exchanged worried glances. To them it sounded like a child's imagination. To Maya it felt undeniable. Bears do have remarkable memory, but how far it stretches is still debated. Studies show that grizzlies remember food locations for years. A berry patch in summer, a salmon stream in fall. They return season after season, guided not just by instinct, but by learned knowledge. Their spatial memory rivals elephants. Their sense of smell is extraordinary. Scientists estimate a grizzly can detect scents miles away, even underwater. Recognition of individual humans, though, that's harder to prove. An example brings this into focus. In Alaska, researchers tracked a female brown bear who returned to the same fishing site every summer for over a decade. She arrived within days of the salmon run, sometimes appearing on the same log where she'd fished before. Her cubs learned the route from her. That's memory clearly documented. But does that mean she would recognize a specific fisherman she had seen years earlier? The science is cautious. Bears recognize scent, posture, and tone of voice. But no peer-reviewed study confirms they hold personal relationships with humans. Still, stories circulate. Hikers swear a bear looked at them with familiarity. A photographer insists the same grizzly tolerated his presence year after year. Are these myths? Or are they human interpretations of survival behavior? The line is thin. Maya, of course, didn't care about scientific caution. What she felt was connection. Her wheelchair didn't register to the bear as a threat or prey. Her stillness, her quiet, her sketching, all of it made her presence different from the crowd. She wondered if the bear sensed that difference. It is possible to feel deeply without needing proof. The danger comes when feelings drive decisions. Believing the bear knows me could tempt someone to step closer, to drop boundaries. That's when accidents happen. The wise balance is to hold on to the meaning of the experience without rewriting the rules of safety. Another example drives this home. In Montana, a man fed a black bear near his cabin, convinced it recognized him as a friend. For weeks, the bear returned calmly. Then one evening, startled by a sudden movement, it charged. The man survived, but the bear was killed by wardens. What he read as friendship was simply food conditioning. His misinterpretation cost the bear its life. Maybe we don't need to decide whether it's memory or myth. Maybe the value lies in mystery itself. Science can tell us what a bear's brain is capable of. A story can tell us what the human heart experiences. When both truths are held together, we gain humility. We can marvel without claiming ownership. Maya's way of processing this was through her art. She redrew the sow and cubs from memory, shading the eyes darker this time. She whispered to Scout. She looked at me like she remembered something. Scout wagged his tail once as if agreeing, but even in her conviction, Maya didn't try to chase the bear again. She carried her sketchbook instead, letting paper hold what words could not. Bears don't see the way we do. Their vision is serviceable, but not sharp. They rely on scent and hearing more than sight. So when the sow lifted her head and locked eyes with Maya, she may have been catching scent on the wind or triangulating sound. What looked like eye contact may have been sensory calculation. Yet for Maya, the gaze felt like recognition. And maybe in its own way it was. To deepen this, imagine a diagram. The olfactory bulb in a bear's brain is proportionally 5 times larger than in humans. That means scent dominates their world. If Maya's scent had drifted the same way on both encounters, the bear may have connected the dots. Not a memory of her as a person, but a memory of a smell associated with calmness and stillness. Science would say plausible. The story would say magical. Both can be true. The conflict prevention toolkit fits here too. Rangers remind visitors, don't let feelings of recognition lower your guard. Carry bear spray. Practice drawing it. Talk calmly. Back away at angles. Space isn't disrespect, it's respect. When Maya whispered, "It's okay," she was soothing herself, not the bear. And that's okay. Words can steady humans, even if they mean nothing to wild animals. Here's another example. In Banff, Canada, a group of hikers reported a grizzly that seemed to follow them for 2 miles. They felt it was curious about them. Biologists later explained that the bear was traveling to a seasonal feeding ground on the same route. The humans misread intent as attention. But the story they carried still shaped how they saw the wild, cautious, reverent changed. The meaning we take from encounters doesn't have to match the animal's intent. The bear's reason and our reason don't need to align for the experience to matter. The risk comes only when we blur the boundary and assume the bear wants closeness. Maybe mystery is the point. If every wild encounter could be reduced to data, the wild would lose some of its hold on us. Part of what makes grizzly bears powerful symbols is that they resist being fully understood. They remind us that not everything bends to human categories, and that humility, acknowledging what we cannot know, keeps us safer and keeps them wild. Maya lay in bed that night, staring at the dark ceiling sketches piled beside her. Her parents whispered in the next room about leaving the park early. She listened, then turned to Scout. "I don't want to leave," she said softly. "I think the bear is trying to tell me something." Scout nuzzled her hand. She closed her eyes, the bear's gaze imprinted in her mind. And she wasn't entirely wrong. What happens after such close encounters isn't only about feelings. It's about systems, rangers, reports, closures, and communities deciding how to coexist. Because when a grizzly steps into human space, the story doesn't end with memory or myth. It continues in the very real choices people make the next day. The morning after the second encounter, the Carters found a notice slipped under the cabin door, bear advisory in effect. Stay alert. Report sightings. It was simple black text on white paper, but to Maya it felt like a seal placed on her memory, proof that what she had witnessed was real. She held the page in her hands as Scout leaned against her chair, his weight steady as ever. For the Rangers, though, the advisory wasn't about memories, it was about management. Every close approach is logged, tracked, and added to a pattern. Daniel Ortiz's notes from the meadow distance behavior. Cubs present, human reaction had already been entered into the system. Another team walked the site at dawn, checking for scat prints or food left behind. The bear wasn't gone from their thoughts. She was now part of their daily work. When a grizzly shows up near people more than once, managers act quickly. They may close a trail, post signs at entrances, or even restrict picnic areas. The goal isn't punishment, it's prevention. Bears that learn people mean food often don't live long. By moving humans out of the way, early rangers give bears the chance to remain wild. An example shows why. In Cook City, Montana, a few years ago, a grizzly repeatedly entered campgrounds where coolers were left open. Visitors thought it was thrilling at first, photos spread fast. But within weeks, the bear had lost fear of people. The outcome was grim relocation and eventually removal when it returned. The advisory signs that many ignore could have changed that story. The Carters met Ortiz at the visitor center later that day. He crouched to speak with Maya at eye level. "You okay after yesterday?" She nodded, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. He tapped the cover. "That's good work, but I need you to understand what happened was rare. Don't expect it again. And don't chase it." His tone was gentle but firm. He handed Cole a pamphlet, Bear Country Guidelines. Inside were checklists: store food, leash dogs, carry spray, keep distance. For Maya, it felt strange. The encounter had been magic. Yet here it was, reduced to bullet points. But those bullet points save lives, or can coexist with rules. In fact, rules are what keep awe from turning into loss. It's tempting to think signs and pamphlets steal the magic. In truth, they protect the very possibility of it happening again for someone else on another day with another bear. Communities around the park know this well. Jackson, Wyoming passed ordinances requiring bear-resistant trash cans after repeated conflicts. Some resisted at first, more expensive, less convenient. But soon garbage-related bear deaths dropped sharply. A single piece of legislation saved multiple animals. That's community coexistence in action. Living with wild animals isn't about eliminating encounters, it's about shaping them. Coexistence means designing towns, trails, and habitats with wildlife in mind. For families like the Carters, it means accepting inconvenience, packing out trash, sticking to designated paths, keeping Scout close. For locals, it means fences for chickens, locked dumpsters, and clean camps. Each small action is a piece of a larger covenant we will adapt so the bears don't have to pay the price of our mistakes. Another example deepens this. In Durango, Colorado, volunteers launched a Bear Smart program, distributing free bear-proof containers and teaching residents to secure attractants. Within 2 years, conflict calls dropped by half. The bears didn't change. The people did. That shift is what kept animals wild and communities safe. Back at the cabin, Maya studied her sketches again. She added new details, the sign, the ranger's steady hand, Scout's watchful stance. Her art became a blend of memory and message. She told her parents, "I think I need to show these to people. Not just to remember, but to help." Jenna and Cole exchanged a glance. They'd been talking privately about leaving early, afraid of another encounter. But hearing their daughter speak that way softened their resistance. Maybe this wasn't just about fear, it was about responsibility too. Stories carry power. A ranger's report enters a database. A child's sketch enters hearts. Both can shape behavior. But the sketch may go further, reminding people that behind every advisory sign is a living creature depending on our choices. Ortiz stopped by again that evening, checking cabins along the advisory zone. He knocked Scout, barked once, and Maya opened her sketchbook without a word. She showed him her drawing of the sow with cubs. He studied it for a long moment, then nodded. "That's worth sharing," he said quietly. But when you share it, tell the rules too. Don't just tell the wonder, tell the work. This is what true coexistence requires, not just celebration, not just caution, but both. If we only tell the magic, people chase it recklessly. If we only tell the danger, people retreat in fear or resentment. The balance is where respect lives. The next day, a trail near the meadow was temporarily closed. Signs went up. Rangers patrolled, visitors grumbled. "We came all this way," one hiker complained. "Why should a bear get priority?" Ortiz answered the way rangers often do, "Because it's her home. We're guests." That sentence holds the entire ethic of coexistence. Maya heard it too, and it stayed with her. In her next sketch, she drew not just the bear, but also people stepping back, leaving space. She wanted to capture that coexistence was not about heroics, it was about humility. Coexistence is not a single act. It's a culture. A ranger files a report. A town passes an ordinance. A family leashes a dog. A child sketches a bear with enough reverence to remind others of responsibility. Each thread weaves into a fabric that lets wild animals stay wild. As the carters packed to leave a few days later, Maya taped her sketches into her journal. She didn't feel finished. The story wasn't just hers anymore. She sensed that her drawings might reach further, maybe to her classmates back home, maybe to the visitors she hadn't even met. She closed the book and whispered to Scout, "This isn't the end." And she was right. Because what began as a private encounter in a quiet meadow would grow into something larger. A story shared a call to protect and a reminder that love for wild animals must carry responsibility too. The emotional weight of this would stay with Maya long after she left the Tetons. And for those who hear it, it might just shift the way they see the wild forever. When the carters left Grand Teton, the meadow faded into the distance, but it didn't fade from Maya's heart. She sat in the back seat of the car, sketchbook open, pencil moving with the hum of the road. Scout lay curled beside her chair, sighing as if relieved the week was over. Yet Maya didn't feel finished. She felt charged, as though the bear had handed her something unseen, a responsibility she couldn't yet name. Back home, she placed her drawings on the kitchen table. Page after page showed the grizzly sow, her cubs, the advisory sign, and the ranger's steady hand. Her parents flipped through them quietly. Finally, Jenna said, "These aren't just sketches. They're stories." Cole added, "And stories change people. When we share encounters with wild animals responsibly, we shape culture. A ranger's report may keep records. A community's ordinance may protect trash cans. But a personal story told with respect, framed with lessons, reaches hearts. People change not just because of rules, but because they feel the stakes. An example makes this vivid. In Colorado, a high school student once launched a photography exhibit of black bears raiding garbage bins. She paired each photo with information on coexistence. What began as a class project turned into a town-wide initiative. Businesses bought bear-proof containers, residents attended training, and conflicts dropped. A teenager's story shifted adult behavior. Maya's sketches held the same potential. At her parents' encouragement, Maya shared her drawings with her classmates. She explained how close the bear had come, how the ranger posted signs, and how her family learned about rules that protect both people and bears. She didn't make the magic story alone. She wove in responsibility. Kids listened with wide eyes. Teachers asked her to present again. Soon a local wildlife group invited her to speak at their community event. Standing in front of strangers made Maya's hands shake. But she opened her sketchbook, showed the sow and cubs, and said simply, "This happened to me." It was beautiful, but it could have gone badly. I want these animals to stay alive. That means we have to do our part. The room grew quiet the way the meadow had. Then applause rose not just for her bravery, but for the truth she carried. You don't need to be a scientist, ranger, or adult to contribute. Sharing responsibly is itself conservation. Every voice matters when it tells both the wonder and the work. Knowledge deepens this truth. If viewers take one thing forward, let it be this toolkit for coexistence: store food and trash in bear-proof containers. Leash dogs in bear country. They can trigger defensive charges. Carry bear spray, practice drawing it and know its range. Give grizzlies 100 yards like the length of a football field. Reports encounters so that rangers can respond before patterns escalate. These actions are not abstract, they save lives. A single cooler left out can end a bear's story. A single report filed can protect a whole valley. In Jackson Hole, locals formed a volunteer patrol that checks campsites nightly for attractants. They don't see it as a burden, they see it as love. By walking loops with flashlights and clipboards, they give bears freedom to stay wild. Coexistence isn't glamorous, it's routine done by people who care. Often when we talk about protecting wild animals, we imagine rescue centers, sanctuaries, or dramatic interventions. But the most powerful protection is invisible. It's the trash can that locks, the hiker who turns back, the camper who double-checks, the child who tells a story that changes her neighbor's mind. Coexistence is built not on moments of heroism, but on habits of care. For Maya, the emotional payoff was not the bear's gaze itself. It was what came after. She realized her wheelchair did not limit her voice. It amplified it. People listened because her perspective was different. She noticed details others overlooked. She stayed still when others panicked. That stillness, once just survival, had become strength. Her parents saw it too. They encouraged her to keep sharing, to bring her sketches to community meetings, to partner with local conservation groups. Each time she spoke, the mystery of the bear rippled outward, inspiring people to think differently about their own choices. Wild animals are not here to give us moments. They are here to live their own lives. Our responsibility is not to seek closeness, but to protect distance. The true gift is not eye contact in a meadow. It's knowing the grizzly sow will raise her cubs unseen, safe from our interference. Maya learned this deeply. She began ending her talks with the same sentence, "Boundaries are love." She explained that keeping distance, storing food, and leashing dogs are not acts of fear, but acts of compassion. They say to the bear, "We respect you enough to let you remain yourself." Her story is a reminder that emotional payoffs don't end with tears in a meadow. They end with changed behavior, safer communities, and wild animals that still roam free. And they continue each time someone else carries the lesson forward. Now comes the reflection for you. Ask yourself, what stories are you telling about wild animals? Do they celebrate closeness, or do they teach responsibility? When you hike camp or even put out your trash, are you making choices that protect bears, wolves, elk, and other forest animals? The answers matter not just for you, but for the animals who share this land with us. And if Maya's story touched you, if the grizzly bear, the sketchbook, and the mystery stayed in your chest, then carry it forward. Share it with someone else. Let it remind you that wonder and responsibility walk hand in hand. Like this video if it moved you. Subscribe to the channel for more animal stories that blend science with heart, mystery with meaning. Together, we can build a culture of compassion. One choice, one sketch, one story at a time.